Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. My episode today is with a guest. And for most of you who know me and listen to the podcast or watch it on YouTube, you know that I don't have that many guests on anymore. And so when I find somebody that I want to have on, they got to be someone special. And they have to be somebody that I'm curious about, I want to know more about. They intrigue me, and they're saying something as a thought leader that I want you all to hear them. So that is who my guest is today. But before we get started, I want to just throw out to you, as I always do, if you are interested in coaching, therapy in the state of Illinois, that's therapy, coaching is anywhere, come talk to me. Okay, you know I'm here. hello@annamarcolene.com. You'll get on a call with me and let's see if we would be a good fit for each other. All right, so don't forget that. And then also, please don't forget to rate and review the podcast with 5 stars. At some point, it takes you about 30 seconds, and that is so appreciated. All right. Okay. So my guest today is Ryan Dunlap. I found Ryan on TikTok. It's like my new favorite social media app. So the algorithm shows me a lot of coaches, because if I look at one or two coaches and what they say, then especially on TikTok, they're going to send me all the coaches. And so I do scroll past most of them, but Ryan made me stop and listen because he talks about conflict, and this guy knows what he's talking about. So welcome, Ryan, to the podcast. Tell us a little bit about who you are, and let's get into this book that you just wrote.
I love it. Thanks, Anna, for having me. I appreciate it. That's funny. I'm sorry. I'm stuck on the TikTok thing because I think like you, when I started posting videos anyway, I didn't even use TikTok. I was like, I don't want to be on there with a bunch of dancing kids on there.
Yes.
But like you, I found a wealth of knowledge on there, and it's been really cool to build an audience there. So yeah, but a little bit about me is it's kind of an interesting backstory, right? I spent 14 years in law enforcement, and I got to wear a lot of hats. I was a special operations guy, worked gang intelligence, special victims, was a burglary detective. I worked forensics. But the highlight of my time was really spent as a SWAT hostage negotiator and as a crisis intervention officer. So in those capacities, kind of unlike what you do in the majority of law enforcement, where you spend a lot of your time and energy on tactical training and firearms training, which I did those things too, I also had a very healthy dose of tactical communication and emotional intelligence and behavior psychology type training to inform the way we were communicating in crisis and in conflict. So that was the law enforcement side of it. My wife got tired of me playing G.I. Joe. And so I found an opportunity to transition out of law enforcement. I went into ministry. And that was really the moment I recognized that I had a great technical skill set, but there was still something missing. Law enforcement taught me all the technical skills I needed to have hard conversations, but I didn't understand how people worked, not until I became a pastor.
Wow.
And so I had this technical competency. I didn't really have this people competency. And so ministry really shaped and rounded out the experience I had, and got to work in 3 amazing churches as an executive pastor. I served as the executive director of an anti-human trafficking organization. And through all of my executive leadership experience, I found myself unknowingly coaching people.
Yeah.
I didn't know it was coaching. I didn't know people got paid for that. It was just leadership development. And it was kind of that bottom line on the job description, helping to develop people. So ultimately, I got to the point where, after 20 some odd years of navigating these disparate experiences and working on some state task forces and advisory task forces and working on legislation, some things that came later in my career, I decided to hang a shingle and start coaching, primarily in the space of conflict strategy, helping people find the courage to be honest with themselves about themselves, to navigate difficult conversations. And here we are. It's kind of a whirlwind, but yeah, it's been fun.
I think I saw this on, maybe it was on TikTok. I'm not sure if it was when you and I spoke before today's conversation. You talked about how when you were in law enforcement, and you alluded to it right now, how you spoke in a certain way with, the public. You knew how to have, I believe, hard conversations, but something happened when you went into ministry and you became a pastor. You had said something about not knowing how to speak so much to that industry or colleagues and maybe people in the church. Can you elaborate upon that a little bit?
Yeah. The thing about being a hostage negotiator and crisis interventionist is the number one thing you really have to learn to do is not be taken for a ride by your emotions. So a lot of what we're doing is we're having these conversations of high consequence.
Yeah.
We're having these life or death conversations, but our personal emotions aren't attached to the conversation. And so we're able to think a little bit more clearly, more tactically. And then to be completely transparent, what we typically know, if I'm having a conversation with a barricaded gunman or a hostage taker, even if they don't decide to comply, there were 60 well-armed men and women standing behind me who were going to force them to
Sure.
comply.
Okay.
So there
Okay.
was a level of pressure I was able to use in that space to say, hey, if you don't want to deal with the ugly guy behind the corner, you got to deal with me.
Hmm.
It gave me more leverage. When I went into ministry, I wasn't abrasive. I wasn't rude. I wasn't disrespectful. The problem was I had the courage to step into hard conversations that a lot of people don't necessarily have the courage to do. So I was going straight for the jugular on some of these conversations
You were
like, hey,
used to that. Yeah.
yeah, I was just used to having the conversation. And so I didn't have the soft skills, so to speak, that would take a hard conversation and make it a little bit more palatable. So I was rubbing people the wrong way. I was offending people. And
Because you
again,
were
not
too
because I
direct.
just too courageous. It was kind of
Ah,
like going
yeah.
into hard conversations immediately. Whereas I think some people just kind of
Yeah.
naturally know, like, hey, this is going to be a
Yeah.
little bit sensitive. Maybe we can have a conversation on Friday. I was the guy that says, hey, I understand that there's a performance deficiency and you're on the bubble. So we need to talk about whether or not employment is going to be a thing for you in the next 30 days or not. And people were like,
What?
what?
What? What? Yeah. Right.
And so
What?
it was
Yeah.
just kind of like getting to it and not really knowing how to bring some of those soft skills in it. So that's ultimately what caused me to step into this whole journey of figuring out how to improve the way I show up in
Yeah.
conflict, because I recognize that deficiency. Good heart, great intentions, great skill, just missing this human component. And that really set me off on a journey of discovery.
So, how did you learn those soft skills, and where did you learn them?
Well, a couple of places. In fact, you mentioned the book. I kind of dedicated it to, I didn't kind of, I did. I dedicated it to my wife and my kids because a majority of this was practiced on them. You
Really?
know, a lot of it was at home and realizing that my wife and my kids were the unintended targets of really, really direct communication. And I want to emphasize that because I think a lot of times in our minds, we always think that communication has to be rude, disrespectful, offensive,
Yes.
attacking.
Yes.
You
Yes.
know, I'm not yelling and screaming and cussing at my wife and my kids. I'm not using profane language or anything like that. It was just the style felt
Yes.
very rigid. It was hard for them to take. And so it was the delivery thing. So my wife and kids were a big part of it, listening to them and their feedback. And then in ministry, I found myself in situations where I had to constantly be available for people emotionally. And that's where I
Yes.
learned it. So one of the greatest things my wife and I did was we decided to teach trauma recovery for first responders and military vets. There was a program developed by some mental health experts specifically for first responders and military vets. And we brought it into the church. And I was just going to be leading this with my wife. I was serving as a law enforcement chaplain. I had no intentions of going through that program and learning about me, but that's what
Wow.
happened. And as we were going through the curriculum, I'm like, uh-oh, I've got that problem. I've got this issue.
Wow.
And so as we strip back the layers of the onion, so to speak, not only was I able to help other people recognize some things about themselves where they were a little rough around the edges, but I was able to see it in me too. And that was the thing that really kind of over 8 years of ministry really helped me to soften up and show up for people, meet them where they were. And now I can't turn it off. So it's it's a big part of how I
Wonderful.
communicate now is just connecting with people where they are.
You seem so chill, calm, collected, and just, you probably always were, but you just seem like, yeah, you've always been that way. It's interesting to hear that there's another person before. Were you growing? This is the evolution of us
Yeah.
as people, right?
Can I give context to that though?
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
reality is, you know, and this probably leans more into your world. I was a train wreck as a kid. I was that kid who was diagnosed with childhood depression early on, extreme
Really?
ADHD. I had counselors, psychologists, psychiatrists. I was heavily medicated through grade school.
Really?
And so I struggled for a long time because in my mind, I felt like I always knew what I wanted to say and how I wanted to show up. But my behavior just kind of was had a mind of its own. And so I was constantly doing and saying things that are outside of my intentions. And so that walked with me through high school and early years of college until I was really able to harness that. And so early on, I wasn't always cool, calm, and collected. I was kind of manic, but this was in me. I needed to know how to organize my thoughts better. I needed
Yes.
to understand which parts of me were who I was and which parts were how I was. And so that just took some years of discovery and some therapy and some things like that. And then
Yeah.
ultimately, I was able to separate conditioning, habits, environment from the core of who I really am. And what I learned about myself is that I thrive under pressure. I thrive. My mind gets clear. I get more sharp, where most people kind of shrink back. That's where I
Right.
can really come up. And so I've learned how to channel that now. But before, I would almost find myself creating high pressure situations just so I felt more comfortable. You know what I mean?
Wow. Yeah, I do. Well, I was a hothead as a kid. I wasn't diagnosed with attention deficit until I was an adult, but
Wow.
it's rampant in my family. I think my father was a successful orthopedic surgeon, but I think my father had ADHD, very bright man. I went to get my tonsils out in the hospital where he worked, and I'll never forget. I was lying there on the gurney in the OR, and OR nurses come over and like, "Oh, you're Dr. Markeline's daughter." I'm like, yeah, yeah, yeah. Like, I don't really want to talk to you right now. I'm so nervous in this room. Please put me under, And they're like, your daddy, he's like a bull in a china shop. And I'll never forget that. So much of it, my siblings, and now my kids. And it's just something that runs in many of us. And was a hothead and had poor impulse control. And I was the person who used to say what everybody else thought, but wouldn't say. Well, I would say it. And it got me into a lot of trouble. School, teachers, friends, family members. When you're talking, a lot of what you're saying does resonate. So how did law enforcement help you control the impulses and what felt out of control when you were an adolescent? Did that help it?
I think law enforcement did. One, because there are some built-in outlets in law enforcement. I mean, we're going to extreme calls all the time. And I think where
Right.
most people struggle with finding an active outlet, a good high-speed chase and a foot pursuit there and getting shot at a couple times will really help to
Yeah,
regulate
right. Yeah.
emotions, right? Because at work, I was able to experience these extreme emotions. And so it became a little bit easier for me to recognize what situations warranted such extreme emotions. And again, I think I was born a little bit more emotionally intelligent than most people. And so it was easy for me to recognize the disconnect between where I was and where I wanted to be. And I was
Yeah.
intentional about improving that and shrinking that gap. So law enforcement was a big part of it. The other side of it was my wife is a gift on this side of life that I wish more people had someone like. My wife and I met when we were 15 years old. And we made a commitment to get married when we were 16. And she had some ground rules. And, what's been really cool is, we always tell people from puberty to parenthood, we've grown together. And I really feel
Wow.
like my wife was the person who created the safe space for me to be and to become. And so she's always been very clear about, you're not showing up the way I expected you to show up. I expected more of a man, right? Honestly, she expected her father, as like a lot
Yeah.
of little girls do who
Yes.
admire their fathers, right?
Yes.
And so she expected someone who was cool, calm, and under pressure. Under pressure, he did well. He was a career military enlisted soldier, retired as a first sergeant in the MP company. I came from a military family. My mother and father both retired military. My dad's retired master sergeant. My mother's retired staff sergeant.
Well,
So I had the DNA,
yeah, you did.
but
You
she
do.
required it. She required
Of
not only
you.
that,
Of
but
you.
she also required faith. She said,
Yes.
you got to go to church. You need to learn this Jesus thing. And I said, yeah, I heard about him. So I wasn't a kid who grew up in church, and so I think I think early on it was trying to impress her, but then it was trying to build a life with her, through high school and through college. And when we eventually got married and had kids, it was like, okay, there's a standard that she sees in me that every year I get a little bit closer, a little bit closer, a little bit closer. And she creates such a safe environment
Wow.
where she doesn't allow herself to be harmed, right? So there are boundaries. There are
Yeah.
boundaries. I can't cross these certain things. But at the same time, she's allowed me to become the man that I am. And that's why I really dedicated this book to her. The version of me that people see today is not the version of me she married almost 20 years ago and committed to, 25 years ago. I've gone through evolution and evolution,
Well, God bless you both. You've grown up together. You
100%.
really grown up together, and she's grown you up.
Yes.
And yeah, when the beginning of the book, when you talked about I think you were in law enforcement, she was a dispatcher, 911
Correct.
dispatcher,
Yep.
and you had twin preemies. And I was
Yep.
an NICU social worker. Those are my first jobs in college and graduate school. So I was right there, and I was reading what you all were going through, and I was right there imagining the stress that puts on parents. And here you were running around trying to do all the things. And that was the first time I think you realized someone said something to you like, you need to take care of you. Oh, your medical checkup.
That's right.
And
That's
you have
right.
hypertension. And
Yeah.
the doctor said, you're taking a break. And you're like, no, I'm
Yeah.
good. I'm good. I'm good.
Yep.
Because you weren't paying attention to you.
That's it. Yeah, it was like 24, 25 years old. I was working in gang intelligence at the time, unmarked car, doing all kind of high speed stuff. I had just lost my mother to cancer.
Yes.
The twins were in the NICU. And every day was a gift because at that time the doctors weren't sure they were going to make it. 2 pounds,
Oh, really?
blood
Yeah. Intubated.
transfusions, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, everything, the whole
The
nine. It was
lungs were not fully
stress.
developed probably at
Yep.
that point.
Couldn't
Right.
breathe. Yeah,
Right.
all of the
Right.
things. And
Right.
so we had that going on. And, as I explained in the book, I got popped for a random drug test.
Hmm.
And yeah, I've never touched drugs a day in my life. And so those were always things for me. I was like, oh, whatever. So I go and I do the drug test, and he wasn't even concerned about the drugs. He's like, hey, tell me what's going on in life. And unbeknownst to me, my blood pressure was through the roof. I was at the red level, stroke level, like imminent.
And you're 24, 25 years old?
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah. And he said, hey, if this keeps up, you're not going to make it to your next birthday. And so he did. He sidelined me. He was like, you cannot go to work. You're not fit for duty. And that was really one of those first time moments where I realized, okay, so what I thought I was doing a good job of was like managing all this stress. Clearly I'm not. It's just coming out in ways that I haven't been paying attention to. So we had to make some
oh.
changes.
Thinking about your wife, who now I want to know and meet because she sounds like just an amazing person. She told you in so many ways that you could be the man that you are today.
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking about the messaging that we get when we're younger. And I see a lot of this with my clients about, well, therapy and coaching clients, the messaging, whether it be verbal, nonverbal, implied from family members, maybe teachers, coaches, about, yeah, you're never going to make it. You'll be okay. You're not going to amount to much. Whether we heard it or we didn't hear it, there's something that we internalize and we let it just kind of like sludge inside of us. It just stays in there. And that's our narrative. And I don't know about that for you. It doesn't sound like you had that, but your wife, as 15, 16-year-old, she said something very different to you. And I want to emphasize that because I think it's important for people to hear, to get support people in your life. And
100%.
if you don't have it, go find it.
Yeah.
20, 21, 22 years old, because would you agree that, I think you just said it, what impact she had on you and your self-knowledge that I may not have it now, but I can do it. I can get there.
I think it's so important. And I don't think it's something that I appreciated at the time, right? It's something I can look back and appreciate now. My wife, she's never emasculated me. She's never talked down to me. She's never told me that I wasn't capable. She has told me when I was falling short. I remember the moment she told me some years in, she says, we were talking about having potentially another baby. We had 3 kids at the time. So the twins, they lived, obviously.
Right.
And then we actually had a third not too long after. And so we had 3 kids and we were talking about potentially having a fourth. And she told me with the most direct and clear language, she says, I will never have another baby with you.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, and it cut me. But she says, listen, I feel like a single parent. You are Mr. SWAT. You're Mr. Save the World. You're never home. It's a call out. You're gone for 2 or 3 days. There's these traumatic situations you go to and you come home for a little bit. You're drained. You're not able to do the things that
Right.
we both expected you to do when we were praying for these kids.
Yes.
And so I'm carrying this, and I couldn't imagine adding another life to my load.
Oh, huge mental load on her.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was just like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh. Right. It
Yeah.
crushed me. I wanted to be a victim in the moment, but she was absolutely right. And so some years later, I find myself leaving law enforcement, going into ministry, working on myself, teaching this course with my wife and going through the motions and doing all the things. And it was years later after that we found out she was pregnant. 10 years after our oldest, we found out she was pregnant. And you would think that in that moment I was going to be really happy and really surprised. But I was thinking about the decade-old conversation when she said, I'll never have another baby with you. And we took it to her for a couple of reasons. One, that first pregnancy we actually lost. She miscarried on Valentine's Day. And it forced us to get really honest with ourselves. Like, we were excited for a moment. Is this what we really want? I remember asking her, I said, well, I also remember you said you didn't want to have another baby with me. She was like, I didn't want to have a baby with the version of you were at the time. It had nothing to do with you, who you are, but how you are. You're not the same person anymore. You're not doing the same things. You're here, you're present, you're available. And it was such a weight lifted off of me, right? And so I think having someone in your corner who doesn't put you down, I always say, they don't call you out, they call you up. That's my wife.
Oh, I love that. I love that. I might
That's
borrow
been my
that.
wife forever since day one, for sure.
So when you went to was that like a crisis incident stress debriefing, the trauma recovery that you were doing in the ministry for law enforcement and military?
It's a great question. It's kind of similar to that and the critical incident stress management debriefing kind of thing. It's got
Yep.
similar legs to it, but it's a little bit different. It's a lot more relational. Typically in a CISM space, when we would do CISM debriefs, you would have a clinician, peer, and then a clergy member, and there's
Yep.
a specific way that we do those debriefs. This was definitely much more a ministry small group that
Hmm.
borrowed from some of that structure.
Okay.
In the CISM space, what we're really looking for is people who have exceeded their ability to cope, where we're really looking to identify those who, okay, that person's at risk, or they might need some clinical help over here. And we've got professional counselors and things who can help them with that. In this space, it was actually directed at helping them heal and recognizing, normalizing post-traumatic stress,
Yep.
identifying fruits and roots. So here's the fruit of your current behavior. What's that rooted to? And then helping them make intentional decisions to heal. And so by the end of it, they end up writing this letter. And that's when they realize, oh my gosh, how much further along in life I am in these 12 weeks. So it borrows from it, but it is a little bit different. But the goal is the same, is helping people gain new tools and awareness around, more awareness around where they are and more tools to help get them where they want to be.
I have not heard of this in churches. I think that's a wonderful, wonderful program.
The gentleman who created it, oh, I'm going to butcher his last name, Evan, and his wife, they're in Tennessee. The name of the program initially was
Oh,
Reboot Combat Recovery, I think. And then they did First Line. There's been iterations of it, and I know they've
okay.
changed it and things like that. But we took it and we kind of gave it our own touch because
Flavor. Yeah.
my background and some of the things that I've done and adding the CISM context to it, the critical
Right.
incident, I'm sorry, the crisis intervention
Right.
training that I've done with organizations like NAMI, we were able to kind of really make it dynamic. It was great.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's go into you working with teams, corporate America, CEOs. Let's go there and tell me, like, what made you want to write this book? What inspires you?
Great question. So the team thing, I didn't really see coming. So I left law enforcement and I'm doing a bunch of stuff. When I started my company, what I thought I was going to be doing is just coaching leaders one-on-one.
Right.
And what ended up happening was I did get a couple of leaders and we were helping them overcome some conflict challenges within themselves. And then it led to the unexpected invitation that says, hey man, this has been really great for me. Can you come and do this with my team?
Yeah.
Or can you come back and talk to the whole organization? And so it actually forced me to really kind of change my approach to conflict strategy because I thought I was just going to be a coach. And it turns out that I've got a really good knack for training and keynoting. And so that's really kind of where that happened, where one-to-one was great, but one-to-many was more impactful. And so we started with primarily nonprofits and faith-based groups. And the social media thing is what really changed it. So early on, I started sharing conflict strategy on Instagram. And these were just like 1 or 2 minute long videos with a concept or an idea that I had, something I was researching or something I experienced, that I would try to put some theoretical language around, but make it palatable for people.
Right.
And very quickly, we went from 500 to 50,000 followers, 50,000 to 100,000, 100,000 to 150,000. And it just kept growing. It was wild. And I had someone come to me and say, hey, you should take everything you're putting on Instagram and put it on TikTok. I was apprehensive, but I did. And then TikTok grew. So what that did was it gave us a global audience. And
Yeah.
so we started getting phone calls from people, not just large companies, not just Fortune 50s, but other countries. We're getting phone calls from Europe and Australia and Africa and all across South America from people who all had the same problem. These high conflict engagements, either they were a problem solver or a problem causer and they needed help. And so that's how that kind of evolved. And the theme, the red thread that kind of went through all of these interactions for the first few years of doing this was that conflict felt too big for people to wrap their heads around. Problem
Mm,
number one. Problem number two, most people knew exactly how to solve problems. They knew, they had a good idea. They knew that they were supposed to speak with respect, that they were supposed to listen well. They knew that they were supposed to give other people an opportunity to feel heard. So nobody was confused on what needed to happen. The problem they were facing is they couldn't do it when they were angry, upset, frustrated, offended,
yep.
hangry, right?
Yes.
And
Right.
so that was really kind of the aha for me, was like, okay, people know what to do. They don't know how to do it under high pressure. And that's just something that I happen to know how to do pretty well as a hostage negotiator.
And the
And
stakes are
so,
high. Yeah,
was
keep her
that?
cool. When the
Yeah.
stakes are high, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was the real kind of like the aha moment for me in the book. And so what ended up happening and how we got to the title of it was I did a keynote for a group and I wanted a visual. I just wanted something that they could see. And I was like, I'm going to use a balloon. I made it up on the fly. It was not well thought out. What ended up happening was they were going to take the balloon, fill it up. And this is actually something we got from the law enforcement training that we had done. They write a piece of stress or something that they're contending with on the balloon, and we make them carry all the balloons. And it's a demonstration. But I changed it last minute. I had this group of people blow up these balloons, and they had stress written on it. And I said, I want you to do something else. I want to see how long it takes you to untie that balloon. And I set a
I know.
timer. And people were fumbling, and the balloons popped. Half the people gave up. And I said, you can't untie a balloon.
Right.
And that was like, that's us. Like, we're the balloon. It's so easy for us to get full of hot air. It's so hard to release it because it requires thinking and time and energy and focus. And if we can learn how to slow down and untie a balloon, we can learn to slow down and untie ourselves. That's the whole premise of the book, is if I can remove that high pressure that you're feeling, then you'll naturally do the things you already know how to do. Speak low and slow, listen well, give people your ear, help them feel heard, lean into emotional intelligence and empathy, which I think most people, not all, but certainly, but I think most people have an understanding of. They just can't do it under pressure.
Do you think, I'm wondering about the emotional intelligence piece. Do you think most people do have emotional intelligence? Sometimes I wonder about
No,
that.
no, no.
Okay.
I think
Okay.
most
Because
people I think most
I don't know.
people lack emotional intelligence. I
Yeah.
think they have the capacity for it. I don't know if they have the willingness.
Because that's the ability to self-regulate, especially in
100%.
high stakes moments, and they get
Yeah.
dysregulated, and there's the anger, and it comes out sideways, and maybe you didn't mean to say it, or you didn't mean to give that look, and
Yeah.
you did it, and that's where you come in.
100%. Yeah. And
Yeah,
that's what I said. I think we have the capacity for it, but there
yeah,
has to be a willingness. But I don't think most people have it. I think they have an awareness that it's necessary. I don't know if they would call it emotional intelligence, but I think the general public, people who aren't dealing with, something that they might find in the DSM-5, right? So you're reasonable and rational.
right,
So you've got that aspect working for you, right? I think they generally know, treat people with kindness, they'll treat you back.
right,
I think they understand mirroring behavior. The more angry I become, the more angry they'll likely become.
right.
I think we have felt the effects of something like a Batari box. My attitude influences my behavior, which influences your attitude and your behavior, and it's cyclical. I think we know these things inherently.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah,
And so my job is to help give language to it, give legs to it, and say, oh, that's self-awareness. That's self-regulation. That's social awareness. That is relationship management. These are the main pillars of emotional intelligence. And we build these
yep.
things up one at a time so that I don't just know who I am. I know how I affect other people. I don't just
How
know
you
who I am.
show
I know
up.
how to regulate myself. How I show up when things are blowing
Yeah,
up is what we talk about for sure.
yep,
So
yep.
yeah, we have to teach that component. So I think most people have a capacity for it, but most people absolutely lack it as well.
Something that you're really good at, which is your wiring, I think, is you said earlier, you don't panic. Like you know how to stay calm when everything around you is kind of going to hell in a handbasket. You can
Yeah.
stay calm. And right now, we're watching a documentary on Ulysses S. Grant, the 17th president, and I made him watch it, but now he's like, this is great, mom. So, but one thing he was known for, what made him such a great military strategist and leading all these in the Civil War, leading with the troops, was his ability when everyone's panicking, he's not. I did not know this about him. They called him, it was a kid, he was bullied, Ulysses S. Grant. They called him Useless Grant. Yeah. Useless Grant hit the kids in the neighborhood. Everybody called him this. It was terrible. It's a poor kid. But wow, when it came to fighting that Mexican American War out west, years before the Civil War, did he show up? He was a great horseman, and he such bravery and such courage that he showed. But he knew, like, everyone's freaking out. He just went to a different place, and it probably was something that was in his wiring, but something that was being trained in him probably from a young age
Hmm.
that he didn't realize. And you reminded me a little bit of that.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah,
I take it as a
yeah,
compliment. I don't know what to attribute it to. We all have some level of uncertainty avoidance, right? Some of us do
right.
better with uncertainty than others. And so I do think it's a bit of a superpower to be in a high pressure situation and to be able to collect your thoughts. And those are things that I want to be able to teach people for sure. but it takes time. And I think one of the advantages I have is I've been so overexposed to high levels of life or death stress that it's made
Right.
it even easier to navigate things that I think other people would be overcome by. My brain is like, okay, well, it's not life or death, so I can, I
Yeah.
can do this. It's one of the reasons why I try to encourage people to not just avoid conflict. I tell them to seek disagreement and opportunities where conflict is afoot, not because conflict is fun, but because the more you do it, the better at it you become. And you can go from response or from reaction to response.
Yes.
And it takes a lot of reps to get good at doing something that you fundamentally don't like and doesn't necessarily feel good. But we also know that the more exposure we have to it, our natural tendency to just jump straight into limbic processing decreases over time. And I'm not going to automatically find myself in a fight, flight, freeze, or fawn state. Now I can be in an uncomfortable situation. My prefrontal cortex can still be available to me, and I can think my way reasonably through it eventually. It's kind of like exposure therapy, I suppose.
Yes.
Maybe in your world, it works.
Yeah, and I cannot tell you how many times I've told individual clients as well as couples and families, we have to learn how to not react and respond. And that's always a light bulb moment for people. We're not going to react, we're going to respond. So that's taking that adult time out. I always use the knee, like when the doctor puts a thing on your knee, that's you're reacting and you're doing that. You're yelling at each other, you're yelling at the kids, you're yelling at your coworker. No, no, we're not going to do that anymore. We're going to learn to respond. So you're going to take a minute, you're going to take a deep breath, you're going to go in the bathroom and shut the door for 60 seconds and then come out and you will present differently. So
Yeah.
it's the exact same thing. I mean, when you said that right now, I'm like, oh, okay. So we really are very much aligned.
Yeah, we are.
In many ways, yeah. Okay. So let's talk about your framework because I want to get to that because you brought it all into your framework when you in this book about emotional intelligence, feelings. So let's go into
Yeah,
that because I want people to know this so they'll go buy
sure.
this book.
I think I mentioned before, right? Conflict for a lot of people just feels really, really big. Their balloon is fully inflated. When I was working with clients and really just kind of documenting what was the chief challenge they were dealing with, what was the number one problem they were dealing with, it was kind of all over the place. But we had these themes, these main big buckets. Some people would come and say, here's what I'm dealing with. They would have these really, really big feelings, or their needs, their personal interests and needs needed to be met, or they were really concerned about the quality of a relationship, or the moment something happened, the actual inflection point, what we call the situation, that was impactful. Or for others, it was just the toll. I'm tired. I'm tired of trying. I'm tired of
The toll of it
all
all.
these
Yeah.
things. And so I started looking at it and just realizing there are 5 really big things that I think we all feel at various different levels navigating conflict: feelings, interests, relationships, the situation that took place, and the toll it takes on us. And so I created the first steps framework as an opportunity for people to take a really big conflict challenge, a really big issue, and minimize it into these bite-sized chunks so that you say, okay, what's the feeling I have about this thing I'm going through? What are my personal needs that need to be met? What's my interest? What is the quality of the relationship I have with the other people involved in this situation? Do I want to maintain a relationship? Am I ready to walk away from a relationship? Because those are both possibilities. What's the situation that took place? Not only that, but what's the story I'm telling myself about the
Yes.
situation that took
Yeah.
place? So building that situational awareness is important. And then the toll. What is this really doing to me? Toll was important for me. 24, 25 years old, I did not realize the toll
Right.
stress and conflict had taken on
Right.
me. And it almost took me out. So in the book, what I posit is that if we can take those 5 things and prioritize our pressure point, meaning for me, it might be toll, but for you, it could be feelings. For
Right.
someone else, it could be relationships. If you can work to reduce the pressure you're feeling in one of those areas at a time and then work your way through each of those, conflict gets a little bit easier. So for me, because I took a time out, my toll decreased. I was able to go back and deal with the feelings that I had that I did not understand I was feeling. I was feeling afraid that my kids were going to pass. I was
Right.
grieving the loss of my
Your
mother.
mother.
I was stressed out from being shot at for very little money on the gang task force at that time. So I had some big
Mm.
feelings I had to work on. Then that allowed me to go and navigate the relationship challenges I was having with my wife so I could show up for her and not just be a roommate, but be a spouse, be a husband,
Right.
right? And then we could talk about my personal interests that need to be met, and then the situations were taking place. And so that's how I started working through my conflict stuff. It took years to kind of put language to it, But that's ultimately what the book is all about. How do you take a big conflict issue and minimize it into these bite-sized chunks that allows you to iterate your way through problem solving so that you don't have to solve everything all at once? That's usually where our balloons pop.
Yeah. What what about the person who maybe they're in the corporate world, maybe they're even in a small business, but they like what they do, but they don't like their boss. There's a break, or they don't care for the team. There's poor communication.
Mm,
The boss is just not a great, he's just not a great leader in that. He's not a great communicator. I hear this all the time. So many of these business owners and heads of companies, they didn't learn leadership and communication skills. Yet here they have these teams. And, my dad used to say, excuse my language, but he used to say shit rolls downhill. Well, there's some truth to that. I mean, this stuff's rolling downhill to the employees. So you got one of those employees and they can't stand their direct or their boss.
yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
sure you see this. What do you,
All the time. Yeah.
yeah,
We just
yeah,
had this big conversation. I was in Miami doing a keynote for a large financial institution. I won't name, but I was having this conversation with some of their global leads.
yeah.
There were
See?
leaders from all over Latin America, US and Europe, and we were talking about it. And one of the things that came up in this conversation was like, man, how do you deal with jerks? And I said, well, the first thing you have to do is you have to normalize it and recognize that the character traits and the personality that it takes to lead a company at the highest level typically is out of alignment with the character traits and personality required to make good friends.
Yep.
Most CEOs and business owners, like, they have to have a massive appetite for risk. You know what I mean? Like, because to
Yes.
run a company, you've got to make some decisions that the average person probably wouldn't make.
Right.
And so just going into it, you know that these people are going to be wired a certain way. But then when you look at something like the skills approach to leadership, which tells us that leadership can be broken down into these three primary categories, which are technical skills, human skills, and conceptual skills. To your point, most companies' learning and development initiatives are tied to technical skills. So if you're in finance, I'm going
Right.
to teach you more finance things. If you're in IT, I'm going to teach you more IT things. And what typically happens is we reward technical performance. So if Anna's great, killing it at her job, I'm going to promote you to the next level. Well,
Right.
skills approach tells us at the highest level of leadership, your technical skills no longer matter, right? You
Mm,
can be the CTO, the chief technology officer of an organization, but you're not going to be an expert in networking and information security and servers and web development. All of those
right.
people might fall under you. Your technical competency is not nearly as important as your ability to understand people and how to share ideas, cast vision, communicate. So those human and conceptual skills become better, but nobody teaches those things.
Is that what I need to learn then? I'm now the CTO. Do I need to learn those skills?
Yeah, certainly. Like, if you're in that position of leadership, you would have to have a willingness to go back to the drawing board and relearn leadership from that seat.
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
technical competence any longer. Now
Right.
you have to intentionally go find a coach, get a mentor, some
Right.
accountability, and build your human and conceptual skills.
Right.
Right. And all of the research points to this, right? Coming out of COVID, the number one, not number one, but of the top challenges that people were complaining about was that they didn't feel valued at work. They had disconnection between
Yes.
themselves and leadership, right? And this is a leader's role, is to see people, not processes, right? To see
Mm-hmm.
relationships also, not just results. And so when you're in a situation like that, where you've got a high level leader who is deficient of these things, the first question I want you to ask yourself is, do you think they have the capacity for people? Because they don't all have a capacity. There are certain people I'm thinking of right now. I don't want to call people out, but there are certain
Right.
leaders, high levels of leadership in various companies and governments here in the US, that you can look at them and say, I don't think that person has a capacity for people. I don't think they're wired for it. Their love language is ones and zeros, not X's and
Right.
O's. So in that space, you have to ask yourself the question, are you willing to build your resilience? Right?
Ah, I like that. So you're putting it back on them that you need to build resilience because this boss of yours or this
Yeah.
manager, he or she is never going to be what you want them to be as far as their people skills, and their
Yep.
EQ is low. Okay, we know that. That's not going to change.
Hmm.
You got to work on your own resilience and your mental toughness.
This is the cornerstone of everything
Yes.
that I teach as a conflict
Yep.
strategist. It's very different from what other folks do in my space, where they're teaching interpersonal conflict management. I teach intrapersonal. I don't really care what the other person is doing. I want you to know what you're going to do. So the question is, if they never change, then what?
Yes.
How long can you stay in this environment before you break or pop under pressure? Some people can ride that thing out. And if you know that about yourself, fantastic. Other people can't ride that thing out. And so they've got to plan an exit strategy. My go-to has
Mm,
always been, if you can't change the environment if you can't shape the environment you're in, change it. And
okay.
sometimes you're going to be in an environment where, you know, nothing that you do allows you to shape the culture or move the needle forward. And so that might not be the place for you. Now, can you walk out next week? Probably not. Job market's tough. People losing jobs every day in this country. So, or internationally too. So it might not be as easy as just putting in your 2 weeks. And I recognize that this is not an easy thing to talk
Right.
about. But what I am saying, you know, like I have someone I'm doing some coaching with right now, and we just had an honest conversation. Same scenario, leadership, trash, no emotional intelligence, harsh. Not only that, but the culture of the company almost requires it.
Like I can't stand my boss.
Yeah.
I can't
Can't
stand
stand
my
it.
boss. Love the money.
Yep.
Love what it has afforded me, but I can't stand my boss or these people like it's causing them
Yep.
so much personal distress in their
Yep. And
lives.
I asked that person, I said, how much longer do you think you can stay in this environment if nothing changes before you lose control? And they said, you know what? I probably got about 6 months.
Really?
6 months.
Yeah.
I said, okay, so within 6 months, what does better look like? You know, and so now we're having to reverse engineer this thing, and they're recognizing, like, okay, this isn't the place for me. Because here's what they wanted to do. What they wanted to do was have me help them craft the perfect speech to then take to their
That will
supervisor.
change that. Yes, that will
Yeah,
change them.
you know, you could write a
It can
perfect
happen.
speech and it doesn't mean it's going to change their behavior. And I said, so what if we didn't change them? What if we changed you? Something about
Yeah.
you. Changed your seat, changed your assignment, changed the organization you're in, changed your resilience, helped you compartmentalize a little bit better so you can withstand this environment a little bit better. So it's tough. It's tough. And because it's not just changing their behavior, it's also recognizing that sometimes anytime you raise that flag, you're subjecting yourself to potential retaliation. And inevitably, these people who have someone over here who doesn't like them, they have someone else in another position of authority who does. So it
Yeah.
becomes your word against the masses. You're
Yes.
powerless. Your voice doesn't carry any weight. And
Right.
so when you recognize that in the writings on the wall, that just might not be the place for you. Some people thrive in environments like that. I've talked to some high level attorneys. It's dog eat dog, or some of these consultants and the big three or the big four
Hmm.
on the financial side. They love it. They thrive in those environments. It's crabs in a barrel for them. Not
It's
for
a
me.
certain right. It's a personality type.
Yeah, it is.
And I think that what I have seen is it's a certain point with clients where they say to me, because I'm all about mental toughness, grit, resilience, being a former athlete for so many years. And that's a lot of why people come to me. But they say, this is no longer about grit and resilience, Anna. I have mental toughness. This is not about that. I am miserable. So, to
Yeah.
your point, that sometimes you have to pivot into having a conversation about, okay, well, maybe my job is to help you find an exit strategy and go elsewhere
Yeah.
if it's that bad, that
Yeah.
toxic of an environment for you.
Yeah. You've got to choose your
Yeah.
hard. I mean, that's really what it
Yeah.
comes down to. It's going to be
Yeah.
hard to stay. It's going to be hard to leave. Just choose your hard.
Yeah.
You're going to lose something in the mix at some point. And so what I want to do is help you find the courage to be honest with yourself about which loss you're willing to take. So we ask these questions. Like, if you knew that your earnings were going to increase 10% every year for the next 3 years, what you say, is that worth it for you? Would you be willing to take a 20% pay cut to have 100% contentment and happiness at work?
What do people say, Ryan?
Almost across the board, people are willing to make less to be happy, almost across the board.
Interesting.
And you wouldn't think it, but the data supports it, because you have a lot of high level leaders and things like that who will try to throw money at someone who's trying to leave an organization. Let's retool your package.
Right.
I'm going to throw some more money, some incentives at you. And the money doesn't move the needle because it's not an extrinsic problem. It's an intrinsic problem. And money's only going to cover that for so long. And I've seen people take the money and then 3 to 6 months later, they're right back in the same position. They thought they had the fuel and they didn't.
Uh,
They didn't, because you probably heard of this term. It's kind of coming to some question here on the research side, ego depletion. But, this idea that you've only got so much self-control and self-restraint to go around in a 24-hour period of time. And at some point you run out of gas.
yeah.
And so most people are willing to take a little bit less to be in a space where they feel like they can think, their opinions are valued, their relationships are healthy, they get to go home and show up for their family well. They would rather make a lifestyle change financially than to have to just continue enduring this emotional hardship.
It's like a death by a thousand cuts for many of them.
100%.
Now I'm curious about What about the guy or the gal who is the leader, is the boss? You said you were at that conference speaking at that meeting in Miami, and they said to you, yeah, what do you do? We're dealing with these jerks here. Have you dealt with the jerk?
Oh
Because,
yeah.
like, the jerks, like, they are the leader, they are the a hole. Like,
Yeah.
how do you tell me about how do they see it?
So here's what's been interesting about it. Most of them start off by feeling like victims.
Oh,
So they're
really?
misunderstood. Yeah, misunderstood. They don't understand. This is what it takes, yada, yada, yada. But usually it's because their number one focus is on results,
Yep.
or if they've got narcissistic personality traits, not
Yes.
necessarily narcissistic personality disorder.
Right.
I feel more people
Traits.
have traits than anything.
It's only
Um,
2% of the population is NPD.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I think when we see that, it almost starts with a conversation about victimization. And we're able to
Yeah.
pull them really quickly out of that conversation and say, okay, cool. And I always do this bad leader story analogy. And I'll ask people, who's the worst leader you've ever worked for? And they'll go through, oh, I worked for this one guy who was a jerk. I worked for this one lady, she was a jerk. We'll go through the whole thing. And how did that impact you? When did that happen? 10 years ago, really? 10 years ago, you're still thinking about that bad leader. And I'll pause for a second. I'll say, you know, what's one thing that's really, really crazy about this is that I'm willing to bet somewhere on the other side of the world, around a different coffee table, but similar to this one, two or three people are having a conversation and one person is sharing a bad leader story about you. I'm willing to bet that at some point you've become someone else's bad leader story. Tell me about that person. And when give them an opportunity to go back and think about the people they've stepped on and the people they've harmed, that's when they can just honestly say, yeah, I was probably a little bit harsh. I probably didn't spend enough time doing XYZ with this person. They'll justify it, but they'll recognize it. And I don't care if they justify it. You can justify poor behavior.
You
I
don't,
just want you
okay.
to see it. Because if I call it out of you, you're going to deny it. But if you come up on your own, that self-determination process that says, yeah, there's some times I've been a jerk. Okay, cool. Let me ask you a question. If working with me helps you eliminate the opportunity of becoming someone else's bad leader story in the future, past is the past. But think about everybody else you're going to have to lead for the next 10 to 15 years until you hit retirement. If we could eliminate that, would it be worth it to you? Now, if it's worth it to them, we work. And if it's not, then I say, I might not be the person for you.
Yeah.
And most of them always say, yeah, I think it would be worth it. And what I have to do is help them understand that relationships equal results, especially for these results oriented people who feel like they only leverage people to get things done. I help them understand that when people feel belonging, when they feel connected, when they have access, so many theories and so much research supports the idea that they're going to come in earlier, leave later, work harder, right? And so that's what we try to do. Now, does everybody do it? No. And in fact, I can think of 2 VPs right now in recent history that I worked with who were the problem, who knew they were the problem, who said they were willing to change but didn't do the work, and both of them got terminated.
They did.
We didn't even finish our coaching engagements. I reached back out to HR and I was like, hey, I didn't hear from so-and-so in 2 weeks. And they've been released. They've gotten
Wow.
let go. Right now, here's the thing. One of them, and this was very, very cool for me. Some months had gone by. I think this was like almost a year had passed. And I got an email out of the blue. It says, hey, wanted to give you an update. Here's what I've learned about myself post coaching and after I got terminated from the role. And it was all of these life lessons and things that they had shared. I'm back in therapy. I'm getting healthy. I'm doing the things you told me to do. I wanted to let you know I got another job offer. I'm going to be moving to such and such, and here's what I'm going to be doing. And I'll never forget the time that we spent together. Thank you so much for the help.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
Came out of
What
the
a
blue.
great email.
And I'm telling you, one of the most difficult people I've ever had to work with. I mean, I would hang up and go upstairs and have to pray with my wife because
I've been there.
it was just like, oh my gosh, and to get that was just like so fulfilling and gratifying. So yeah, I work with jerks all the time. We've got these categories of people we work with, and at the top it's Scrooges and Corellas.
The level of jerkiness,
That's
the
it. Yeah,
jerkiness
we do.
ranking
It
scale.
is. It's Scrooges and Corellas at the top level. These are people who are just jerks. They've been jerks for so long they don't even know how many people they've burned. And so we deal with Scrooges and Corellas all the way down to the lower end, which is Elwoods and Steve Urkels. These are people, they just probably got the knowledge and the technical skills. They don't have the people skills. They're kind of green. They're unconvincing. I think in the middle we have, who did we put in the middle for this? It was Harvey and I can't remember the girls, Sloan and Harvey. So not nearly as well known, but these Harvey from Suits and Sloan is a character from a TV show with the same name, where these are like mid-level professionals who are super, super sharp at what they do, but their people skills almost always cause them to step into some personal crises.
Right.
And so like
Right.
there's this scale we can see from Urkel and Elwood's to Harvey and Sloan all the way up to Cruella and Scrooge. And I'm always kind of figuring out like where are we at on the scale of
Right.
conflict complicity here.
Who is like, oh, this is a piece of cake for you to work with, like I can do this easily, and who is for you the challenge? Because I don't want to assume that the Cruellas are the ones that you're like, yeah, I'm curious.
Yeah.
Who is it that you're like, oh, this is, I'm really looking forward to working with this person.
100%.
And I'm looking forward to seeing the changes in them.
Yeah, you got it. Level 1 to level 2 are usually pretty easy. The reason, though, that the Cruellas and the Scrooges are hard is because my coaching is a little bit different. I'm not only coaching people who want coaching. Some of what I'm doing is also like the board calls. The senior leadership team calls and says, this person must get coached or else. So sometimes they're assigned to coaching and they don't really want to be there. And that's usually the person who's been in that role for 35, 40 years. They've been around.
What are you going to tell me?
What are you going to tell me about ...
Right.
Yeah. And so that's why it gets hard, right? But again, the conversation goes back to don't worry about me as some 40-something coach talking to a 60-something-year-old executive.
Yeah.
The question is, how do you want to show up? Is it any different from how you're currently showing up? If the answer is yes, I can help. Do you want the help? That's essentially what it is, you know?
Let me ask you, out of all these people that you've interfaced with and work with, how much is it apparent to you that there are mental health issues in their lives, in their personal lives, relationships?
100%. I would tell you that
Really?
at least half of my coaching clients are also in therapy.
Yep.
And maybe a quarter of those who aren't should be.
Yeah.
No question. So here's what we deal with. And so I've been teaching coaching at the University of Buffalo for the last 2 years. And so we have other leaders who are learning how to coach. And one of the number one questions you always get is, what's the difference between coaching and therapy?
All the time.
And people are like, how do you know the difference? And I always tell people, you know, in therapy or in a clinical setting, a lot of times what we're doing is we're deconstructing the past to really inform the present.
Right.
I need to know what happened to you to really define what's going on today. I said, as a coach, what I'm doing is I'm taking you from where you are today and I'm helping build your future.
Yes.
So knowing about the past is helpful, but I can't diagnose that. I can't treat that. That's a different specialization. So I'm helping you design a future. And so what tends to happen after that is people ask the next question is, what happens when you find out someone needs help, needs therapy?
Right.
I said, you tell them they need therapy.
They need to see a therapist.
Some people are not healthy enough to work with me. And so we have certainly had to tell people, I don't think you're ready for the level of coaching that I'm going to impart. It's going to be a waste of your time, energy, and money. And so what we'll do with them is we'll refer them out. Mm-hmm. We'll ask for at least a referral or a letter. So like if you're going through intensive therapy, I want to hear from your therapist that they feel like you're in a place where we can partner together. And I'm not going to step on your toes with any of these things.
Good. Really good.
But in terms
really
of
good,
just
Ryan.
Understanding how we can build forward, here's the direction I want to help them as a leader. Is that going to be in alignment? So we've only had to navigate that at the extreme level maybe twice. But generally speaking, most of my clients come to me because their therapist said, you probably need a coach.
Yeah.
And so it's a partnership. And I think it works itself really, really well.
Yeah. My practice is divided, half therapy, half coaching. People come to people, because I'm a therapist, but they come for coaching and they say, I've done the work. I've dealt with the issues with my mom or whatever. I've done trauma treatment for whatever it might be. I don't need to work on my inner child, but I want to find my mate or I want to move up at work or start a new business. And thank you for saying that. And I love that you do that because that's an ethical coaching that you're teaching. I get crazy about this because I see people in the coaching space who probably the lines get gray and they're working with someone, they have a good relationship, but then you're like 6 sessions in, you're 3 months in and something comes up. And as a coach, you're like, yeah, this is beyond my bandwidth. I don't know how to treat this. And they will go ahead and they'll try to.
Yeah.
And I think it comes to a good place and you're not equipped. You don't have the skills to treat that person and you got to be careful, especially with trauma.
Yep.
So I appreciate and respect that.
Yeah, I think that's the thing is like, I have to be aware of those things, right? So that when I do hear them, I'm like, oh, that's because there are times I'll say like, oh, that sounds like an anxious attachment issue, right?
Right.
So you've got some active trauma over there, right? But I'll never bring it up. You know, we'll kind of pause for a second and say, hey, what's your understanding of your ability to emotionally navigate the next steps of this conversation? Well,
good question.
Your therapist, you know what I mean? Like, how many tabs do you have open right now? And the tab question is my favorite question to ask people.
I love that. How many tabs you have open?
Yeah, it's like an internet browser. You know what I
Yes.
mean? And I tell people all the time is like, you might not be looking at every screen at the time, but every internet browser tab that you have open is taking energy, memory from
Yes.
your computer. And it's the same way in your brain. You're thinking about me, you're thinking about this session, you're thinking about work, you're thinking about your coworker, you're thinking about your kids, you're thinking about your mom and past trauma. And you've got 7 grudges you never let go of. Like, how many tabs do you have open right now? And
Yeah.
a lot of times people are just like, man, I got a lot of tabs open. So, okay, so what's your understanding of your ability to navigate high level coaching when you've got so many things going on right now in the back of your mind?
You got me thinking about, how do you coach people through resentment? I mean, you must hear people
Mhm.
talking about resentment of their colleague. They got the promotion, I didn't. I
Yeah.
resent my boss. This reminds me of my resentment towards my ex-wife.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sure you hear it.
Hmm.
Is that, I don't know, you just got me thinking about resentment and how you work with that.
Hmm. We reality test it.
Yeah.
Again, it's the hostage negotiator in me. It's like, oh, you got resentment. You hate Crystal in your life. Okay, cool. How's that working for you? How's it working for you? I think I asked somebody recently. He's, I refuse to let it go. I said, that's great. That's cool. Hang on to it. I don't have a problem with that. Um, what's it
Oh,
cost you?
geez, yeah. Yeah.
What's it cost you? And what is it that you could be holding on to that you can't because your hands are full with resentment?
And or on forgiveness.
We're in forgiveness. This is the thing we have to understand. Like, research is very clear on this. The average person is hanging on to 7 grudges at any given time for, I think, on average of 5 years for as long as 11 years, is what the research shows. 5 to 11 years, 7 different grudges. That's what we're hanging on to. And if that's your jam, that's great. I'm not going to convince you to do something you don't want to do. I just want you to have an accurate tally of what it's costing you, right? How much sleep have you lost? How long have you been stuck in the past? How long have they been living rent free in the back of your mind?
Yep.
Right? Because if you think hanging on to this is punishing them, that's like drinking poison and expecting them to die. It's not going to work. You're the only person suffering.
Yeah.
Half the people you have a grudge about right now probably don't even know that they're
They
in the
have
back of
no
your mind.
idea.
They have no
Yes.
idea. So
Yes.
what is this gaining you? Like, if we can at least get super, super clear about what this is gaining you, I will jump on the other side of this argument, hang on to that resentment. And no one yet has been able to demonstrate why that resentment was worth hanging on to. Now, this is not invalidating it. This is not saying that it's not warranted or that I don't understand why this person had such a heavy impact on your life. But I tell people heroes and villains have the same backstory. The only difference is what you decide to do in
Yes.
the outcome. They were hurt in some
Yes.
way, taken advantage of in some way, and one person became a champion for change and the other one became a victim of circumstances. What's your story?
Yes.
Choose your story. You can be the victim, you can be the villain, you can be the victor. It's whatever. It makes me no difference. But I want you to know that you've designed your future, that you didn't just land there accidentally. So if you're saying I'm the victim and that's the way I want this story to end, great. But nobody chooses that on purpose. Nobody
Choose your
chooses that on
story.
purpose.
Yeah. I love that. Choose your story.
Choose it.
So, Ryan, you've now worked with people every walk of life at this point in your entire career, right? So, socially, economically, race, religion, you name it. Are there parallels between the people who are in the dredges of life, maybe not from a great background, poor, don't have family support, struggling, maybe on public aid, getting in the WIC program, all the things.
Mm-hmm.
And then you got people, and I don't like to do this, but like then you got people over here who are, well, socially, economically doing better. They went to college, they've got a graduate degree. The people over here, not so much. How are we this similar? And what are the differences that you've seen in these humans throughout the course of your career?
The biggest difference I see is access to resources.
Yep.
Right. So the ability to find someone to talk to help them navigate things or pay for the things. The greatest similarity is that everyone's chasing fulfillment and they think that things or the next conversation or the next promotion or the next thing is going to get it for them. And so for people who are in the trenches, they feel like, man, if I could just get out of these trenches, everything
Yeah.
will get better. And for someone who's at the top of the food chain, man, if I could just get this next billion, if I could just get this next movie role, if I could just get past this next election cycle, right? And so I call it problem substitution, and I call it out whenever I see it. And I says, no, that's not going to do it. You're
Right.
searching for contentment, and contentment is not going to be something that exists off a checkoff list, right? Contentment is an inner state that you've got to kind of find with where you're at. And so we've got to understand why you aren't content right now. Why is it so hard for you to stop and smell the roses? And
Yeah.
especially for people who are at the top, someone in the trenches, I understand life
I do
can be
too.
bleak. It makes
Sure.
more sense there, but you start asking, man, the people who call out, we get calls from a lot of folks who are, like I said, elected officials, celebrities, athletes, and they have the same problem. And I tell people all the time, is like, your problems are not unique. I know
Yeah.
your mom said you were special growing up. You're not special. Your problems are not unique.
They need to hear
Everybody's
that.
dealing with the same things. And what did you find? All your money, all your fame, all your notoriety did not help you get better, did not help you feel better. At some point, you still have to do the work here. And this is why we can find people who have nothing but have everything, and people who have everything but have nothing.
At the end of the day, I think it's about love. Love.
I think that's the thing that withstands us. And, I won't get hyper spiritual, but the pastor in me absolutely agrees with you. I always tell people, I think from a spiritual level, there's only so much we're able to do for ourselves. There's always going to be something that's a little bit out of reach because of our mortality.
Yes.
And I think if you are at the highest level in your food chain, I think you're always going to feel like you're missing something. I don't always get to kind of champion that side of things because, I exist in a secular space. But when I have faith-based conversations, I will tell you the difference between the senior leader who was terminated and I didn't hear from and the one who was terminated and I did hear from is that this leader, we had faith conversations. It came up. And they wasn't proselytizing and we weren't preaching, but there was a conversation where it came up where I recognized that there was a disconnect from what that person said they believed and how they were actually behaving. And so there's a violation of the 3 B's: beliefs, boundaries, behaviors. Here are the things I say I believe. Here are the boundaries I place around those beliefs to protect them. And here's how I'm behaving to cover those boundaries to model my beliefs. Right. And so what happens is I find that as a much easier conversation to have with people who do have a faith system that they're operating within.
I fully agree.
So,
I'm a secular therapist, life coach as well. If people want to have that conversation, I'm about it all day long because I'm a spiritual person, Christian, grew up Catholic. My faith is everything to me, and it is the guiding force of my life. Those who are listening now may be surprised by that. I don't talk about it. But I do talk to my clients about the mind, the body, and spirituality. And I do say to them, some people, they know I'm spiritual and I'm interested in talking with them about it. I will talk all day long, or they're interested in talking about it. I'll talk about it with them all day long. I do think it makes the coaching and the therapy richer. I do say it doesn't matter to me what your religion is. Find some sort of spirituality because we're all going to die. And I'm now over past high noon. I'm, starting to go down the other side. And I am thinking more about my mortality than I ever have before. And I think it's important to think about people, for some reason in this country, in our society, speaking of death and dying is taboo. Well, I mean, I worked with the death and dying, and so it's something I'm very open about. It's almost like people would rather talk about sex more than they talk about death and dying. We're more comfortable talking about sex in this country than dying. And anyways, eulogize yourself is what I say. Eulogize yourself, because at your eulogy or at your wake or at your Shiva or at your visitation, I don't think people are going to stand around and go, did you see that Lamborghini he drove?
That's right.
Well, he had a really nice house on the lake. Oh, that second home in Vail. Wow. No one's talking about that. What they're talking about and then what they're remembering and how they're memorializing you is based on how you made other people feel, how you showed up in life and how you made them feel. That's what they remember, right?
I love it. No, it's so spot on. One of the things that I like to do with my really, really high conflict personalities when we start coaching is we do a pre-mortem. Do you know what I mean? Everybody's clear on a post-mortem. We know how it died. I want you to write your pre-mortem report, and I want you to investigate your death and your downfall, right? And you get this, right? You get this from Scrooge. He got to see it from outside of himself. I want you to imagine how other people are going to talk about you, how other people are going to remember you on the other side. If today was it, if it ended right now, you didn't do all of the things that were tied to intention, and you could only do a pre-mortem on impact, what would that look like? And that's when things get real for a lot of people. That's when it's like, oh man, I don't think
it's
I've
a wake-up call.
It is. Yeah. It is. And I think that's why even the story of Scrooge and A Christmas Carol is so impactful for someone like him. Sometimes people have to see it to believe it. And if you can help them see themselves the way the world sees them, they'll start showing up differently.
Self-awareness.
Yes.
Okay. I could talk to you for hours. I mean, we could talk about self-awareness. That's a whole other conversation.
Yeah, no, it's good.
So much. Okay. So this book, I think everybody, How to Untie a Balloon. It's a wonderful book that Ryan has written. I told my husband this week when I was reading it, you need to buy this book. And I think it's a must read book for your works book club because they have one. It's just so great. So thank you for the work, the time, the energy that you put into this. I know what it takes to write a book, and be very proud of yourself because this is excellent.
Thank
Excellent.
you. Thank you so
Yeah.
much. I receive it. I appreciate that so
Yeah.
much.
Good, good. Ryan, where can people find you if they want to follow you? Can they reach out to you? Tell us all the things about you.
Yeah. So we try to have a pretty strong social media presence. So if you're on TikTok, Instagram is our largest following. TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, we post daily conflict strategy videos, 90-second tips trying to help people improve their conflict competency, one conversation at a time. I'm also on LinkedIn. And if anyone's interested in work or anything like that, you can always find me at any of those locations, or just go to conflictist.com and get in contact with the team and see how we can come in and help you get your ish together too.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for coming on, and all the best to you.
Absolute pleasure. I appreciate it. I'm sure we'll have another conversation. This is good.
Yeah, I think this is wonderful.
Yeah.
Right.